Okay, in this tutorial I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about alleles again, and then teach you how to do a Punnett square, and we'll actually go through a couple of example questions. So, if an individual has two of the same alleles, they're said to be homozygous, and if they are different at the alleles, they're said to be heterozygous. Now, what does that all mean? Well, basically, guys, remember we said alleles are different versions of a gene. Slightly different versions of a gene. And so we looked at, for instance, we spoke about you could have the allele for blue eyes or green eyes, or the allele for blonde hair or brown hair, things like that. So different versions. They're genes that code for the same characteristic, but they're a slightly different version of the gene. They give you a slightly different version of that characteristic. So if we've got two versions of a gene, often rather than writing that out each time, we just use letters. So what do I mean by that? Well, for instance, here we might have the letter A, and we can use a capital A. In this case, makes the bird red. So there's a gene for color in these birds, and one of them makes it red. Now, rather than writing out the gene for red color, we just use a capital A. Boom, capital A. And if the bird is blue, well, there's a gene for blue color, a little a. So we use a little a to show it rather than writing out the gene for blue color, all right? Or rather, actually, we should be saying the allele for blue color, the version of the gene. So we've got two versions of the gene for color in these birds. And one gene gives you red color. So one allele, one version of the gene gives you red color. And the other allele, the other version of the gene, gives you blue color. So it's quite convenient, rather than having to write out, we can just use a letter. So if we've got two of each, two copies of every gene, so these birds will have two copies of the gene for color, then they will, we write that as being two letters. So there are three possibilities then. A bird could have two big A's, which in this case makes them red, or they could have two little a's, which in this case makes them blue. Alright, so if they've got two of the versions, but what happens if they've got a big A and a little a? So what happens if they've got the allele for red color and the allele for blue color? Well, what happens is one version of the gene might be dominant over the other one. So in this case, if you've got the allele, the version of the gene for red color, and the allele for blue color, the bird is still red. So there are three possible combinations here. Homozygous, so homo meaning the same. All right, homozygous dominant means that you've got two of the dominant allele, in this case two big A's. Heterozygous, which means hetero means different. So in this case it's we've got different alleles, the dominant, the big A and the little a. Or homozygous recessive, meaning the same and the recessive alleles. So two of the recessive alleles, little a, little a. In this case is blue. So it's the important thing here to be aware of is, well, firstly, you can see there are three different possible what we call genotypes. So those are different combinations of alleles. We had big A, little a, and little a, little a. But there are only two different possible phenotypes. Now the phenotype is the physical characteristic that results. So this is really important here. Genotype is the combination of alleles. So whether we've got a big A, you know, the combination of alleles. And a phenotype is the physical characteristic. So if we come back up here, why is it that we have three possible genotypes here? Big A, little a, little a, and only two different phenotypes, red or blue. Well, it's because this one here is also red. But why is this one red even though it has a big A in it? Because the big A, the allele for red color is dominant. And that means it is always expressed. Now we need to make a note of that because that's really important. And you need to be really careful with your language when you're doing this in a test. You've got to be very careful with what language you use here. So the big A, or the gene for red, is dominant. Now, dominant basically means that that allele is always, and this is the word you need to be using, expressed. Now you could say it always shows up, that's fine, but expressed is really the word that we're looking for there. So the dominant allele, maybe I should put that in there, the dominant allele is always expressed. So in this case, that's the capital A. And that's how we tend to do it. We tend to use upper and lower case letters, capitals and little letters, to show which allele, which version of the gene is dominant and which one is recessive. So the dominant allele here is the allele for red color, so we've given that a capital A, and the recessive allele is the little a for blue color. Now recessive recessive, and I might not write that out, but recessive is an allele that is only expressed when it's on its own. That's one way you can say it. So a recessive allele is only expressed when there aren't any other alleles present. Or the recessive allele, another way of saying it, is the recessive allele is only expressed when the dominant allele isn't present. So here, two different ways of saying the same thing. The recessive alleles are only expressed when they're on their own, or you can say the recessive alleles are only expressed when the dominant allele is not present. But again, it's using that word expressed. So the dominant allele is always expressed, even if there's another allele present. The recessive allele is only expressed when it's on its own or there isn't another allele present. So that's the key idea there, dominant and recessive. All right, let's carry on. So, three different genotypes here. Genotypes, the combinations of alleles, big A, little a, little a, and two phenotypes, physical characteristics, the red and the blue. All right. So, a Punnett square. What is a Punnett square? Well, a Punnett square essentially shows you a cross between two individuals. Now, what do we mean by a cross? Well, a cross essentially means we're mating them together. So in this case, we're mating a bird that has a big A, little a, and often we do an X to show that it's a cross, and a big A, little a. So the X here tells us it's a cross. We're mating this bird with this bird. Now, a bird, you can see here, parent 1 has a big A and a little a, so what color is it? Well, it's red because the big A is dominant. And this bird here, again, has a big A, little a, so it's red as well because the big A is dominant. Now, what we're going to do is show what essentially the sperm or egg cells could be carrying. So let's say parent 1 here is the male. So he can make, now remember, thinking back to meiosis, when we make sperm or egg cells, this parent will always have two versions of every gene, two alleles. And in this case, it's a big A and a little a, because it's got two of every chromosome. But its sex cells, so these ones here, maybe we're looking at here a sperm cell. So here another sperm cell. The sperm cells will only ever carry one of each chromosome, and therefore one of each gene. So any adult, any individual, any organism, any living thing will essentially have two copies of each gene, but their sex cells will only have one copy of each gene. And so that's really important that you make sure. One thing to check here is that the parents and then eventually the offspring all have two of each gene, whereas their sex cells are the ones with a single copy. So a Punnett square, we start by showing parent number 1 here what type of sex cells they can produce. And in this case, they can make sex cells that either carry a big A, so the allele for red color, or the little a, the allele or version of a gene for blue color. The other bird here we'll assume that's a female, will make egg cells that carry, again, either a big A, or a little a. So these here are the parents' possible gametes, their possible sex cells. Now in the table here, essentially what we're doing is we're showing, well, what would happen if this sperm here, just grab my arrow, so what would happen if this sperm here fertilized this egg? So this one, if you can imagine if they were moving, they collide here, this one and this one, okay, they collide with each other and fuse together to form this offspring here. And if this sperm fertilized this egg and across, all right, if these two collided here to form this offspring, it would have a big A and a little a. And if this sperm fertilized this egg, we would have a big A, little a. And if this egg and this sperm come together here, we will have a little a, little a. So it's a little bit like sort of battleships or, it's just showing if this sperm fertilizes that egg, what would we get? So this gives us the possible offspring. So when these two birds are mated together, these are their possible children. Or rather, it's the genotypes, the combinations of alleles that their children might have. So this child, we'll use red, so this child here, big A, is going to be red. This child here, big A, little a, what color will that be? Well, big A is dominant, the red allele is dominant, so it will also be red. And then this offspring here also has a big A, little a, so that's going to be red too. And what color is this last offspring here going to be? Well, basically, guys, this last one here, two little a's, this one is going to be blue. It's only got the recessive alleles. So all the ones that have a dominant one present, a big A, are going to be red, and the ones that don't have a big A, that only have the recessive allele, it finally gets expressed, is blue. So the parents can actually, two red parents can actually have a blue offspring, have a kid that's blue. Well, how is that possible? Well, both parents have a hidden gene or allele, a version of a gene. So both of them have a hidden allele for blue color. But it's hidden by the fact that they also have a big A, an allele for red color. But if a sperm carrying the allele for blue color and an egg carrying the allele for blue color come together, then the kid can definitely still have blue color. Okay, let's wipe that and let's carry on. So that's basically how you do a Punnett square. So up above there, we've got a cross between two heterozygous individuals. Heterozygous means they've got different alleles. They're big A, little a. And that we can draw like this. Big A, little a times crossed with a big A, little a, another one that's the same. And the resulting ratios of the offspring, so the genotype ratios, we had one that was big A, two that were big A, little a, and one that was little a, little a. So if we look at that here, one that was big A, two that were heterozygous, all right, and one that was the homozygous recessive little a, little a. You can see that here, 1, 2, 1. And the phenotype ratio, we had 3:1. 3 of them were red, and 1 of them was blue. So in this cross, we would expect basically a quarter of them to be blue and 3/4 to be red. So if you had these two birds and they started producing babies, we'd expect roughly, it's always up to chance, but we would expect, probability would predict that approximately a quarter of the offspring would be blue and 3/4 would be red. So 3 out of the 4 would be red and 1 out of the 4 would be blue. So let's do some examples. Question 1. In pea plants, yellow seeds, big E, is dominant to green seeds, little e, which are recessive. So describe what is meant by the terms dominant and recessive. So you see, this actually can come up as a question. Alright, so what does dominant mean? Dominant means the allele, and sorry, I'm not going to write in proper English. So this means, dominant means the allele is always expressed. And that's, for instance, and that's why I did it in red, is for instance the capital A. Alright, so I could put here, e.g. our big A allele for red color is dominant. It's always expressed, even if another allele is present. Whereas recessive, our recessive one here, so I'll just put an arrow down here, recessive means it's only expressed and so you can see here the key word here is this word expressed. Expressed. So the dominant allele was the allele that's always expressed. The recessive allele is the allele that's only expressed when. Alright, and there's two ways of saying it. You can say only expressed when there are no other alleles present, when it's on its own. Or you could say it's only expressed in the absence, when the dominant allele is not present. Now either way you say it, that's fine. So the dominant allele is always expressed, and the recessive allele is only expressed when the dominant one isn't there. So in this case that was e.g. the little a. And that's pretty standard, that you use a capital to show which one is the dominant allele, and the lowercase to show which one is the recessive allele. Alright, let's go on to the next question. So, a homozygous yellow seed pea plant is crossed with a heterozygous, oh, we cut off a little bit there, yellow seed pea plant. Complete a Punnett square to show the genotypes of the offspring. So, well, hold on, yellow seed plant. Well, yellow was dominant, so homozygous yellow seed. Homo, meaning the same, yellow seed pea plant, so homo yellow. So this means, and it's worth, this is actually how I would tackle these problems, or what I would actually do in this situation. Here I would actually be putting homozygous yellow, so that would be big E, big E. Fantastic. With a heterozygous yellow. So heterozygous, I don't even have to look at the color. Heterozygous, I've got two of the different alleles. So it must be a big E, little e. Fantastic. So we're crossing these two things. I can put a little bit of a cross there. So capital E with a capital E lowercase e. Those are the genotypes of the parents. So let's do a Punnett square. When we do a Punnett square, we're going to draw the gametes, the sex cells that each of these parents can make. So the first one, maybe I'll put it on this side, can make, let's assume that's the female again, can make an egg cell that has a capital E in it, or an egg cell that has, well, the other capital E in it. So those are the only two possibilities. This person can only pass on a capital E to their kids. Whereas this individual, so draw my beautifully straight Punnett square here, whereas this parent here can make, we'll assume that's the male, can make sperm cells with either a capital E in them or sperm cells that have a lowercase e in them. So in this case, what are the possible offspring? Well, if this egg fertilizes this one, and I'll go black now, we would get this child would have a capital E, capital E. And if this sperm fertilizes this egg, again, we get an individual who's got a capital E, capital E. Now, if this sperm fertilizes this egg, it's a little bit different. Now we've got a big E, little e. Now, it's just convention that we always put the capital one first. So if you were thinking, oh, it would be little e, big E, well, you're not really wrong, but it's just convention that we put the capital first. So this one, if this sperm fertilizes this egg, we would get a capital E, little e. So having a look at those, what color would they be? Well, this one here has two big E's, so it'll be yellow. This one's got two big E's, it'll be yellow. This one's only got one big E, but it's dominant, so it's still yellow. And this here, capital E, is, well, it's still yellow. So of the offspring here, they are all yellow. So these kids can only be yellow in color. The offspring will only be yellow in color. And the reason for that is actually because of this parent. Because they've got two capital E's, all of their kid are going to get at least one of those dominant alleles, one of these big E's. So because all of their kids get at least one of the dominant alleles, they'll have the dominant characteristic, the yellow color. Cool, so let's go on to the next question. Well, the next question down here says, explain the difference between genotype and phenotype. So genotype are these things here, the combination of alleles. So using the example here, so genotype, we would say it is the combination of alleles. So what are our possible combinations here? So, e.g., in this case, we've got big E, or big E, little e. So homozygous dominant or heterozygous. So in this case, genotype always means the combination of alleles, and the two possible ones we have here are big E or big E little e, homozygous dominant or heterozygous. The phenotype is the characteristic that actually results. So even though these guys have a different genotype, they're both yellow. So they both have the same phenotype. Alright, I'm going to wipe that and we'll go on to the next question. Question 2. Gregor Mendel is often referred to as the father of modern genetics. His work in the 19th century, involving many thousands of breeding experiments using the garden pea, in pea plants, most round seeds, capital R, are dominant to wrinkled seeds, little r, which are recessive. Yellow seed color is dominant to green seed color. Well, we saw that in the last example. So describe what is meant by dominant and recessive. Well, we did that, so I think we might skip this one. It's a bit of a repeat. But what does dominant mean? Always expressed. Recessive, only expressed when a dominant allele isn't present, or when it's on its own. So B, in a genetic cross of two pea plants that are heterozygous for seed shape, what fraction of the offspring have round seeds? You should use a Punnett square to help with your answer. So in this case, heterozygous. What does heterozygous mean? Well, heterozygous, the two different. So we've got two parents who are heterozygous. We have two different alleles for seed shape, which I think we were told was the R gene. So here, one parent is big R, little r, and the other parent is also heterozygous, so big R, little r as well. So in this case, the parents can produce, this parent can produce egg cells that have a capital R or a little r, and the other parent can produce the same thing. This parent can make sperm cells with either a big R or a little r. So when these two parents breed, if this sperm fertilizes this egg, this offspring, this child will get a big R, big R. This one would get a big R from one parent, but a little r from the other one. This one would be big R from this parent, little r from this parent. And this one would get the little r, little r. So looking at those, what kind of shape would they have? Well, this one would be round. Round was the dominant characteristic. And so would this one. This one would be round too, because it's got at least one big R. And this one here would also be round, because it's also got at least one big R. Whereas this one would be the wrinkly pea, because it doesn't have any of those dominant alleles. So here, what fraction of the offspring would have round seeds? So 3/4 would be round. Cool, I hope you found that helpful, and we'll try and get on to the next one.